What's that you say? Apple is back on their sci-fi game again? Well, sign me up. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. I've been waiting on this one for a minute. Silo was one of my favorite things that I watched a few months back, year back. And unfortunately, we have to do those long waits between seasons now because they weren't quite ready to do a season two or didn't know they were going to get picked up for a season two. So uh, it's been some time since we last saw Juliet go off, exiting her silo and seeing this massive world of a bunch of other silos and our heads sort of exploding and of what the possibilities of what season two can bring. And here's season two here with us. And what's fascinating about this episode is that it gets really large first because it's picking up where we left off with, but then it gets super, super small and intimate and essentially becomes a silent episode. There's not much dialogue, and specifically in the present day, there's no dialogue at the very end of the episode. The dialogue comes in spurts, probably for mainly to just break up the silence in flashbacks, which is fine because I'm not saying this is a bad episode. I, in fact, really love this episode. And I think it's a great start to the second season. And it's a good start to sort of dig in further into Juliet's character. Rebecca Ferguson is pretty much, I'd say, holding down 90% of this episode. And there's not a moment where I got bored or uninterested in what was being given to me on screen. I do want to point out that anybody who watched my previous Silo first season recaps and reviews, I said I was going to go back and read the book. I chose not to because I was told by some folks that first season only dealt with the halfway mark of the first book, and that the second season is probably going to deal with the second half. So I still wanted to go in blind. So I still don't know what's in front of me, which I think is some of the best way to sort of handle these books to TV shows. So let's get into it. This episode begins with what we learn to be a flashback. We see a silo, which I believe I've been told is Silo 18. We see a silo that is starting a rebellion. A rebellion has begun. And so a young man is bringing a note to his father, who happens to be the sheriff, that, hey, we're going to be flooding is going to begin in 15 minutes. Now, it's now or never, basically. And so this rebellion has begun and started to make its way to overthrow the government, overthrow those who are watching through surveillance, and make a push on IT and escape through the door. They believe, like Jules believed, that they were being lied to about the world outside. I don't know if they probably seem like the same way, like they believe the world outside is habitable, and that they're going to make this run for it to go find out what's on the better side of the life. And so they all crunch over, take a bridge over, and some die, some get shot, some get killed, but the majority of them make it out. And we see them storming the gates, opening up the door, and making their way out with a nice green flag. Then it gets dark. It gets dark real fast because then we pick up with Juliet in her suit, happen upon the green flag, and now a torn, tattered, pretty weathered flag. And then she just sees hundreds upon thousands of bodies that tried to escape that silo, all decayed in some various degrees of decay, dead, all the way up to the entry point of the silo door that they pried open, trying to make their way out. None of them lived, because clearly none of them had the key point that Jules had, and that you need to be secured in a spacesuit. Nothing, no air from the outside can get in. Jules thinks, well, I'm going to go make my way in just to see what it was they were escaping from, see what's different, probably just to kind of just curious to be like, what makes that silo different from my silo? So she starts making her way down. The term of the title, the name of the title of this episode is called The Engineer, and there's nothing more fitting. The last season, we spent a lot of time with Jules being a sheriff, something she's adamantly said that I don't want to do. I'm not good at. This isn't my thing. We're now seeing in her true element. And this episode, you get to see her basically do her Laura Crofting throughout this entire episode of how to get in and out of and continue on to the next piece of this silo through her engineering mind. And so she gets down to a point of the door where it's locked, sealed, but she manages to realize how much power, and even though she's a tiny person, how much power she needs to get the door open if she gets enough weight at a different height. So it's just her continuing to use her brain throughout all of this. She finally gets into the silo a little bit deeper, but as she gets in, her suit starts malfunctioning. It seems like she's running out of oxygen, and thus it's becoming a danger to her to still have the suit on. So she breaks the glass open to sort of breathe in the air that is here in the silo, which is habitable for her now. It seems like it's a 1-to-1 to what she was getting in her silo. And she breaks out of the suit. She also decontaminates herself a little bit. She found some liquid to sort of decontaminate herself so that if there was anything left from the outside world, it wouldn't take take shape on her there. The big thing is, though, now that she's out of her suit, she's trapped there. She can't go back out. She's seen what happens to all of those bodies. And so she now has a big point to see, okay, what can I find here that is going to allow me to go either A, go back out here, or B, is habitable enough and there are other people here. There's somebody else here that can tell me what the hell is going on. At that point, that Jewel starts going to go check some of the other homes in the silo, and she sees that they're basically a 1-to-1. It's a carbon copy of what she used to live in there. She sees a two-way mirror that is also watching, so she knows there's a surveillance room somewhere here that is watching them the way that she was being watched back at her silo. She quickly grabs some clothes that sort of fit her, and then she continues on her trek to go see what she can find out here in this silo. I got to say that it has to be sort of a mind twist to see that there is a 1-to-1 ratio of what was in her world here, a lot more desolate and dead here than hers was. At least while the building looked the same, there were at least a vibrant life that was happening there, where this one is now a shadow of its former self. All of this is done in silence, outside of her screaming, yelling. So then we cut in with some flashbacks of Jules when she starts meeting Shirley um, and gets put with mechanical downstairs in her silo. And it just shows a lot of these things are just to show the connection that she did not have to other people her age at this point in time in her life. She wasn't, there was nobody else. The kids that were there that were her age knew of her mom and what happened with her mom and father and how she got placed with Walker and all that stuff. So they kind of just stay away from her. So she has a hard time connecting with others. And so there's a piece where she takes a toy dog off the line and fixes it and sort of presents that as an olive branch to Shirley. Shirley's kind of like, I don't play with toys. What do you want? But she sort of realized that this is kind of her way of bringing them together. And she's like, okay, cool. And they sort of form that bond that we saw in season one. I say all that to say that those flashbacks really serve two purposes. One, to break up the monotony of just silence, of no of no dialogue, and just show that connection. But two, these all show how good Juliet is at being an engineer and how her brain is always thinking of how to survive. That's what those flashbacks do, and then we get to see it sort of being put into effect in real life in present day. While she's in the silo, she sees a light a little bit further down where she thinks it's the IT room, where there's a light there. And so she's like, well, I need to make my way down that way. So she starts heading in that way. She stops at a garden, which was sort of the garden that she tended to and sort of saw where everything went left in the last episode. Had to start running. They took her to basically off her. Here, plants have died, but there's still some trickling of water coming down. So she uses that thought, like, hey, there was a time where my family, where those folks told me that I need to always stay hydrated. Let me make sure I get some water in, maybe because it's too hot down here. And if I don't, I'm going to die. So she starts drinking water, takes some with her. She continues on to where the light is, and she finds an exploded bridge. So she has to think about her way to get across. A lot of this is, again, like a video game or like Uncharted or like Pitfall. You get to see her brain work and how it is that she's going to get across. And so she finds some rope, cuts it up, and sort of creates a rig that's going to give her enough leverage to swing across and make it to the other side. It's cool. You sort of see a camera angle. There's a couple of shots that happen here where you get to see a camera angle from her first person view. It sort of shows her getting closer and closer to that. Unfortunately, because that rope is so old, we don't know how long this place has sort of been in decay, and air and oxygen has sort of been having an effect on it. The rope snaps and breaks, and she goes falling. What could be to her death? What should have been to her death? But in that flashback, we got the note that said, "Hey, in 15 minutes there's going to be a flooding," and the flooding did happen, and so she goes splashing into some water pretty far down. Luckily, she's still alive. She takes a bit of a damage on her arm, but otherwise, she's good to go. She resets and says, "All right, well, I'm going to have to try this again." So she gets back to that bridge because she still wants to see what's on the other side of that and learn where that light is coming from. And so she comes up with another plan and using some piping from some of the old stairs and whatnot to sort of create a makeshift bridge, if you will. Engineering her engineering ass off. She puts it together, lands it out there, and starts making her way across. It doesn't take long though before that bridge sort of collapses under her weight, but it gave her enough of a distance that she could leap the rest of the way and hold on and then cut herself off of her rope tie that was keeping her up. She also learned I'm going to keep myself up as opposed to just going free for all. She makes it to the other side and she just starts investigating. Inside that other side is a fan that's blowing with an ID attached to it and a light. That's where the light coming from. So you can sort of see that her face is a bit dejected. That there doesn't seem to be any type of civilization. This just was just left over, and the light just happened to be left on when everybody cleared out. So she's like, "Well, crap! Now I have to sort of make my way back." When she looks back, she realizes that the bridge is out, of course. So she has to come up with another plan to get back across. Luckily, she sees this long bridge that was made from the rebellion that we saw in the beginning that was actually getting people over to IT. Uh, Clearly, eventually, at some point, IT pulled that bridge apart to stop folks from coming over. Um, that bridge was still there, so she comes up with a way because she obviously Jules is not she's a tiny woman, so she's not the strongest person, but she comes up with a way to get barrels to help her to lift that up to move that into place. So she gets that into place, ready to head back out, and then she starts hearing Moon River playing further down the corridor. She's like, "Well, hold on, wait, someone's here. If that music just started out of nowhere, someone is here. Let me go check that out." She finds a series of doors and starts heading down to it. She's basically heading to their version of the surveillance room uh, that existed in the first season. So it's a room where they can sort of see everything, which means that at some point in this, the person that we learn is in that room was watching Jules and seeing her sort of operate. But she gets to this vault, which is where the surveillance room is. The vault, the same vault that was in there. It's locked. She tries to open it, nothing. So she's ready to turn around and leave. She's like, "Cool, I'm gonna head out." And then some eyes pop up in the peephole of the vault, and they're like, "Hey, real quick, um, I know curiosity got the best of you, and you just tried to open up a door. But if you attempt to open up this door again, I'm going to kill you." And that's how the episode ends. A very I love these episodes don't always have the same tone. There's a little bit of detective stuff that happened in the first season before we got into some of the Big Brothers watching thing. It's always an intensity happening. There's an intensity here too. Seeing Jules' brain and how she has to work and do things, the engineer that's reading the title, you get to see her in her best element survive. And then she gets to a point where it looks like, all right, well, I don't know what to do next. And now there's a sense of hope or maybe somebody else that can kind of help her, but I don't know what's on the other side of that door. I know the actor is Steve Zahn, and I heard that that character's name is Solo, but it's going to be interesting to see if he's an ally, an enemy, or if he ever decides to open up that vault and help her. But it's clear that he's been watching her do what it is she does to get to this point. So he knows that she's a little smarter than the average bear. At the very least, he knows that now. But yeah, a solid way to start the second season. It's good to sort of get some reflection on what that world is. We didn't get too big before we kind of shrunk back down, but we got to see that hey, a lot these people in mass tried. One of these silos tried to leave their place, and it ended poorly for them. Juliet is the one who was a one person who got out, but she was a little bit protected. So now we have to figure out, are these other worlds still habitable? Are there still people there? Um, and it was clear that the sheriff of this Silo 18, was the one who started the rebellion as well. Why does it seem to be something that's always connected to the sheriff? Because they're promoted and not of the world of the big brothers and all of those folks. And so maybe they have a little bit more questions when they get put into there and get a little bit more under the hood of what this world is. Their life doesn't allow them to just sort of fall in line and just take everything as status quo. But yeah, I mean, I'm in. I'm so glad the show is back. I'm glad that we get to talk about these again. This was a fun episode, and I think the world's sort of our oyster to see what's going to happen next. It's a little harder to judge what's going to happen next when we've got none of the original characters from the first season in this, but Jules. So we have no idea what's actually taking place in that first silo. I imagine they have to be freaking out or wondering, hey, did she make it? What's on the other side? Like they are probably getting to that point now where if they don't see her, her body's not out there, then maybe she is gone. And subsequently, what does that mean? Can we leave? So a rebellion is probably going to begin there, but Jules needs to get back there in time to sort of tell her people, like, hey, we need to be protected before we go ahead and do that. But right now, she can't leave. And it seems like this Steve Zahn character might even make that harder than it should be. What did you guys think about the first episode of Silo called The Engineer? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on X at Hollywood80i. You can hit us up on email at hollywoodalreadydid@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you place podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.